Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you new science fiction stories, a new world, a new adventure. And yes, there is no robotic or AI voices here, only real human voices with real human touch. So let's start this journey, and please subscribe my channel if you like the stories and press the bell icon for the latest updates. Let's have a story. Okay.
There is a record. Not a myth, not a cathedral carving or a priest's half-remembered sermon. A record, cold, archived, cross-referenced across 14 independent civilizations that never once communicated with each other. The record says, before the Veth, before the Chorus Collective, before the Pale Architects who built the relay gates and then vanished so completely we assumed they had never existed, there was something else. No name for it in the archive, just a designation. Stratum Zero. We laughed when we found Earth. Not cruelly, the way you laugh at something genuinely charming, a child who has built a castle out of mud and is so proud of it you don't have the heart to mention the rain coming. Their cities were loud. Their politics were loud. They had been spacefaring for, 112 years? We had been spacefaring since before their species had invented the wheel. We called them the young ones in 37 languages. We said it with affection. We said it the way you say it about someone who will never, ever catch up. I was the one who found the Stratum Zero site on their moon. I was the one who ran the carbon dates 3 times because the first 2 came back wrong. I was the one who had to sit very still in a survey tent on Luna, their moon, while the results loaded a 4th time. And I was the one who understood in the specific stomach-dropping way that only field archaeologists understand things that we had not discovered humanity. Humanity had been waiting for us to find our way back to them. What follows is my field report. I have been advised by 4 separate legal departments not to publish it. I am publishing it anyway. The tent smelled like regolith dust and the particular brand of instant meal paste that Survey Division issued us, which tasted like someone had described soup to a machine and the machine had done its best. I had eaten 6 of them in 2 days. I was going to eat a 7th. This is the kind of detail that feels irrelevant until you understand that I log everything, timestamps, sensory notes, equipment status, meals consumed. Because 15 years of field archaeology had taught me that the thing you forget to write down is always the thing that matters. Log entry 7204 C1432 Standard. Selenographic Survey Quadrant 7, Subsection Gamma. Analyst, Verathzone 3rd Cast Excavator de Yen Institute. Meal consumed, paste variant unclear. Finding unclear. Emotional status also unclear. I stared at the readout. The machine had given me a date. The machine was wrong. This was the rational conclusion. Equipment error, calibration drift. The isotope counters had been acting strange since we'd passed through the debris field near Jupiter, their Jupiter as they romanized it in Standard, though the humans themselves called it Jupiter and seemed faintly offended when we used anything else. The counters had needed recalibration twice already. I had noted this in entries 7189 and 7196. It was a known variable, the machine was wrong. I recalibrated and ran the sample again. The machine gave me the same wrong date. Outside the tent, my colleague Foss was doing what Foss always did during a long survey. He was reorganizing the equipment crates by size, then by weight, then by some private system of categorization he had never explained and which I suspected was primarily therapeutic. I could hear the soft clunk of case against case through the polyfilm walls. Foss found physical repetition calming. I found logging calming. We were well matched as a survey team in the specific way that 2 people who will never socialize voluntarily can nonetheless function in perfect professional harmony. Foss, I said. Come look at this. I'm sorting. Foss. The clunking stopped. He pushed through the tent flap, and the particular quality of lunar silence followed him in, that absence of atmosphere quiet that never quite felt like silence, just like sound had given up. He was a tall DN Foss, which meant he had to fold himself to get through the flap, and he unfolded on the other side with the mild dignity of someone who had been folding and unfolding through insufficient doorways his entire career. He looked at the readout. He looked at me. He looked at the readout again. That's wrong, he said. Yes. The machine is wrong. I've run it 4 times. He pulled the readout closer, angling it toward the portable lamp as though better light would produce a better number. It did not produce a better number. It produced the same number in better light. He set it down, picked up the secondary scanner and ran it independently on a fresh sample from the same sealed container. He waited. He read the result. He put the scanner down very carefully, with the deliberate gentleness of someone handling a thing they are afraid of. Veroth, he said. Yes. This artifact, the sealed stratum. Yes. The sealed stratum that is beneath the human lunar landing site from, he checked his notes, 112 years ago. Yes. The stratum that was therefore laid down before that landing. Yes, Voss. This date, he touched the readout, did not pick it up, just touched it. This date is not a calibration error. And that was Voss's version of screaming. Let me tell you what we had come to find. The Galactic Survey Cooperative, the organization that employed us, funded our pace meals and owned the counters that were apparently functioning perfectly, had dispatched 14 survey teams to Earth and its moon following humanity's formal induction into the cooperative. This was standard. Every new species got the historical sweep. We cataloged, we dated, we built a timeline, we filed it. The timeline for humanity was expected to be short and charming. A few 100,000 years of biological development, some interesting proto-tool use, agriculture, writing, then the steep vertical line of industrialization, then space. Clean, simple, the kind of species history that fit into a brochure. We were not supposed to find anything older than human civilization itself sitting beneath human civilization's first footprint off-world. The object in the sealed stratum was not large, 17 centimeters, vaguely cylindrical, made from an alloy that our equipment initially refused to identify, then identified as a composite we had no production record for. It was corroded in the specific way that things corrode when they have been in vacuum for a very long time, not the specific way that things corrode when they have been in vacuum for the amount of time that should have been physically possible. The date said 2.7 million years. 2.7 million. Homo sapiens, the humans who built the lunar landers, who shook our hands at the induction ceremony, who called their gas giant Jupiter and meant it, Homo sapiens was, at the outside, 300,000 years old as a distinct species. Something had been on their moon 2.7 million years ago. And whatever had been there had left something behind. I messaged Director Oveth at the Institute at 16:09 standard. I was precise in the message. I attached all 4 scan results, the independent FOSS scan, the calibration logs, and a note explaining that I was aware of how the message would read and that I had checked everything I could check. She replied at 16:47. Her reply contained one sentence. Don't tell anyone until I get there. Oveth arrived on the next shuttle, which was 31 hours, which I know because I timestamped everything, which I always do. In the interim, Foss and I did not discuss the artifact. We ran additional scans on the surrounding material. We expanded the excavation perimeter. I ate 2 more pace meals. Foss sorted the equipment crates a second time. We were, both of us, doing what our professions had trained us to do in the presence of something our professions had never prepared us for. We worked. It was the only thing that made any sense to do. Oveth was not a dramatic person. She was the kind of administrator who had risen to director through 3 decades of steady, undramatic competence, the kind that doesn't make good stories but produces excellent archaeology. She arrived on the shuttle with her own equipment case and a manner so calm it registered as aggressive. She came into the tent. She read the scans. She examined the artifact through the containment field for a long time without speaking. Then she said, "What's the alloy composition?" "Unidentified," I said. "The database returns no match." "No match to what?" "To any recorded civilization in the cooperative's history, living or extinct." She was quiet. Director Foss said, "There are currently only 2 logical explanations." "I know what the explanations are, Foss." 1. An unknown, unrecorded civilization visited this moon 2.7 million years ago and left this object, and subsequently left no other trace anywhere in our archaeological record. Or Foss. Or the humans somehow, at a point in time before the emergence of their own species, were here. "I know," Oveth said. She didn't look at us, she was still looking at the artifact. "I know," she said again, quieter. "And I need you to understand that when I say don't tell anyone yet, I am not saying that because I want to suppress this." She finally turned. "I'm saying it because when this gets out, every government in the cooperative is going to do one of 2 things. Half of them are going to panic, And the other half, she picked up my logged readout, looked at it one more time, are going to start making plans. She set it down. I want to understand what we're holding before someone else decides what it means. Outside, the lunar surface sat in its familiar stillness, 2.7 million years of it, waiting, apparently with enormous patience, for someone to come and ask the right questions. The humans had landed here 112 years ago, planting a flag on what they thought was empty, ancient ground. It was not empty. It was not ancient. Not compared to what was underneath it. I logged the time, 1922 standard. I did not log what I was feeling, I had no category for it. I ate another paste meal. I stared at the artifact through the containment field until the lamp dimmed on its timer and the tent went dark around me. It was still there when the light came back. It was always going to be there. The human assigned to our team was named Sergeant Dara Osai. She arrived on the same shuttle as the director's containment specialists, which I noted because she was not on the manifest. She was not on any manifest. She appeared in the staging area in the kind of worn field jacket that suggested prolonged use in conditions worse than a lunar survey tent, carrying a single kit bag and a thermos of something she called coffee, which smelled like the floor of a Dovari boiler room and which she drank constantly, refilling from a secondary canteen she kept in her jacket pocket. She introduced herself to me with a handshake, a human contact gesture I had by that point been briefed on but still found mildly startling in practice, the abruptness of it, the assumption of willingness, and said, "You're Verath's zone, you found it." I found it, I agreed. Good, she said, I need you to show me exactly where and walk me through the layers. I looked at Director Oveth, who was standing 6 meters away pretending to review a calibration report. The sergeant is on loan from the Earth Cooperative Liaison Office, Oveth said without looking up. She's been read in. Read into what? Foss asked. Nobody answered Foss. I showed Sergeant Osai the excavation site. She walked the perimeter twice, crouching at intervals, pressing 2 fingers lightly against the regolith as if she could read something through the vacuum suit's fingertips. She asked precise questions, stratum depths, contamination margins, whether we had opened the artifact or only scanned through the containment field. When I told her we'd only scanned, she nodded in a way that seemed like relief. Don't open it, she said. We weren't planning to open it without. I know you weren't, I'm just saying it anyway. She stood, dusted her gloves against her thigh in a gesture that served no function in vacuum but seemed to be habitual. Not yet. Why not yet? I asked. She looked at me. She had the kind of face that had clearly been, at some point, asked too many questions it wasn't authorized to answer and had learned a specific expression to manage it. Not evasive, something more complicated than evasive, a weighing. Because, she said, we need to agree on what we're going to say it is before we know what it actually is, and that's a political problem before it's a scientific one. She went back inside. I logged the time, 0844 standard. I did not log what I thought about what she had said. My log was professional documentation, not a journal. But if it had been a journal, I would have noted that she had just described, without apparent irony, the exact operational logic that the cooperative used when making first contact with new species. Agree on the framing first, then release the facts. We had done it to humanity 14 years ago. I did not know what to do with that symmetry. On the second night, I found her sitting outside the tent. Not unusual in itself, survey teams often stepped outside for the silence or the view, the particular quality of stars in a sky with no atmosphere to blur them. What was unusual was that she had a photograph. A physical photograph, paper in a vacuum suit. Which meant it was tucked in a chest pocket, and she had carefully extracted it and was holding it in one gloved hand with the unnecessary delicacy of someone who knew the suit's grip sensitivity was more than adequate, but was treating the object as though it could be breathed on wrong. I sat beside her, she didn't acknowledge me for a moment, then she tilted the photograph slightly in my direction. It was old, I could see that even through the suit, faded at the corners. It showed 2 humans older standing in front of what I would later learn was called a house, a fixed residential structure, Earth architecture, some style that my uninformed eye read as historical. And between them, held up by both their hands, was something I recognized. 17 centimeters, vaguely cylindrical. Different corrosion, uncorroded in fact. Identical geometry. I sat with that for a moment. That's your family, I said. My grandparents, she said. My grandmother's grandmother's grandparents, actually. That's the word for it in English, great-great-grandparents. There are more greats, but I always lose count. Where did they get? Family object, she said. They called it that, a family object. It was passed down, nobody knew what it was made of, nobody knew how old it was. Grandmother said it was warm to the touch always, regardless of ambient temperature. She thought that was romantic. She put the photograph away. How many humans, I said, know about how many people have objects like? That's the wrong question, she said. What's the right question? She looked at the excavation site, at the neat square hole we had cut into the lunar surface, at the sealed lower stratum visible through the access window we'd installed. The right question, she said, is how many of us have been finding things like this for a long time, in basements, in riverbeds, in the backs of institutional collections that nobody has cataloged in 80 years, and asking each other quietly what they are and not saying anything publicly because, she stopped. Because humans have a word for people who say they found something impossible in their grandmother's basement. She turned to look at me, and through the faceplate her expression was doing several things at once, none of them simple. And for 112 years, every time one of us found something like that and started asking questions, someone else reminded us that we were a young species, that we didn't have the history for anything strange. That we should leave the real archaeology to the civilizations that had been around long enough to have something worth finding. She stood, picked up her coffee thermos, checked it empty. We stopped saying anything, she said, because we believed you. She went inside. I stayed outside for a long time. The star field did not offer any useful perspective. I logged the time 23:17 standard. Ovith convened a full meeting the following morning. Myself, Foss, Sergeant Osai, the 3 containment specialists, and a communications officer who had arrived on a shuttle I hadn't been notified about, which Ovith explained by not explaining it and moving on. The meeting was structured around a single question: what do we do with this? Not what is it, that question was currently unanswerable in a way that would satisfy any governing body. Not what does it mean, that question was bigger than the room and everyone in it knew it. Just what do we do with this? The containment specialists wanted to transport it to a secure facility and run full non-invasive analysis before any decisions were made. The communications officer wanted to delay all reporting by 6 months pending legal review of the cooperative's disclosure obligations. Foss wanted to run more scans. He always wanted to run more scans. Sergeant Osai sat at the end of the table, her empty thermos in front of her, and said nothing until everyone else had finished. Then she said, I want to ask you something and I need an honest answer. We waited. When you inducted us, she said, into the cooperative 14 years ago, you had already done the historical sweep. Standard procedure, Ovith said. You had our timeline, you knew how old our species was, you knew what our archaeological record looked like. Yes. Did any of your teams find anything anomalous? The room was quiet in the specific way that rooms get quiet when everyone in them is calculating the same things simultaneously. Ovith said, define anomalous. Director Sergeant Osai said. Ovith looked at the table. She was very still, which I had come to understand was her version of the thing Foss did with the equipment crates. There were 3 sites, Ovith said, 2 on Earth, 1 on Mars. They were flagged in internal review as equipment anomalies. The dates were, she stopped. They were similar to these dates. The findings were classified pending further study. And the further study was not conducted. Silence. Because, Ovith said, the cooperative was in the middle of an induction process, and certain members of the governing body felt that destabilizing humanity's sense of its own history at the moment we were asking them to join us as the youngest species, the newest members, the ones who had the most to learn would be, she finally looked up, complicated. Sergeant Osai nodded. She nodded the way you nod at something you already knew, but needed someone else to say aloud. So you told us we were young, she said, and hid the parts of the record that suggested we might not be. It was a classification decision made above my rank. I'm not accusing you personally, Director. I know you're not, Ovith looked very tired, that's almost worse. The communications officer started to say something about legal frameworks. Sergeant Osai looked at him. He stopped. Here's what I need to know, she said. Those 3 sites, the 2 on Earth and the Mars site, where are the samples? The communications officer looked at Oveth. Oveth looked at her hands. Institute storage, she said, sublevel 7, uncatalogued. Sergeant Osai picked up her thermos, realized it was empty, set it back down. I'm going to need access to sublevel 7, she said, and I'm going to need 2 of your people to come with me and run proper dates. She looked at me, not Foss, not the containment specialists. May. I don't know why me, I have thought about it since and I have no good answer. You log everything, she said, which was apparently an answer to a question I hadn't asked. I need a record that I can't be told I falsified. I need someone whose methodology is airtight and whose documentation is compulsive. I am not sure I would use the word compulsive, I said. Entry 7204, she said. Meal consumed, paste, variant unclear. I had not shown her my logs. She hadn't needed to see them. She had just known. Fine. I said. I logged the time 09:58 standard. Outside, the excavation site waited, cut into the moon like a question mark, the artifact in its sealed stratum 2.7 million years old and apparently not done with us yet. I was beginning to understand that it had been waiting specifically for us to stop being afraid of the number. And begin being afraid of what the number implied.